Welcome to the College Knowledge Podcast, sponsored by the College Planning Network and Paradigm Financial Group. Whether you're searching for that right fit college, applying to college, or figuring out how you're going to afford it all, you're in the right place. You'll hear from deans, admissions counselors, student athletes, and scholars from esteemed universities and colleges around the country. We'll dig deep to uncover their insight and unique experiences. So whether you're a student gearing up for college or a parent with college-bound kids, sit back, relax, and listen. Like you, we have lots of questions. Our guests have the answers, and we're excited to share them with you. Let's get started. If you didn't know, we have a free crash course on college funding at elitecollegiateplanning.com. This will explain different types of loans, types of financial aid, savings vehicles, and much more.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to College Knowledge. I'm your host, Dave Kozak, alongside my co-host, Mr. Joe Kearns. And today we're interviewing Ryan Fewins-Bliss, the executive director of MCAN. Ryan, why don't you start by giving us a little intro to MCAN?
Yeah, Michigan College Access Network, or MCAN as we're known, is a nonprofit in Michigan, a statewide nonprofit. We're an intermediary organization, so we don't work directly with students and families, but we work with systems and schools and institutions that work with students and families, all toward the Michigan goal of 60 by 30, 60% of Michigan residents having a certificate or degree by the year 2030.
And how long has MCAN been around? And what's the ability of MCAN to create that access? How do you guys go about doing that?
Well, we've been around about 12 years. Our previous governor, actually 2 governors ago, had some federal funds and did a needs assessment across the state. And one of the things that we're missing in the state is sort of a convening body, a statewide higher ed authority, a governor's level cabinet official, a department at the state government, some sort of function that every other state has to organize work around getting more students into and through college. And so that's how MCAN was born. So we work mostly on the system level. So our departments are divided into systems. So we're focusing on high school innovation. How do we change what high schools are doing to better get more students into and through college? We're about to launch a higher education innovation strategy. We've got a community-based strategy. We use national service and volunteerism as a strategy, working with the workforce system as a strategy. So trying to sort of work with the systems that exist to get them to work better and more efficient to get students into and through college, especially students of color, first-generation college-going students, and low-income students.
I always like goal setting, the 60 by 30. I like that. I'm curious, what is that number at now?
We're just under 50% right now. We grow by about 1% a year, which is good and steady, but it's not enough to get us to 60 by 30.
Mm-hmm. So, and is that that number, is that include, or is that, how do I ask this? Is that number not, you said it's actually earning a degree, correct?
A certificate or a degree.
Or a certificate or a degree. So the number just under 50, is that not, so is that is part of the, I guess, the issue that you guys are facing? Is that including like acceptance or actually earning the degree? Like where, I guess, is the focus? Is it essentially getting into schools? Is it finishing? Where are you seeing some of the bigger hurdles? Is it the getting in or actually completing that certificate, those programs, 4-year degree, whatever it may be? Where are you see, is there more of a lack on the front end or the back end?
It's actually both. So when we were sort of born as an organization, we're the Michigan College Access Network. Mm-hmm. We really were born about how to increase access for students. But what we've learned in our existence is we can pipeline all the students we want into college. If the colleges aren't completing them, we're actually doing harm to the students. They're usually taking out student loan debt, and then they don't have the certificate or degree to earn more money to pay off that debt. Right. They also have a morale problem. Stopping out of college, dropping out of college doesn't feel good. So the likelihood that they'll ever come back decreases because they feel like college wasn't for them. They're not college material. So if we pipeline a bunch of those students into higher ed and they don't finish those students, there's a moral and ethical argument that we're actually doing harm to them. So that's what we try to focus on. And we really think about what we call the attainment rate, that 60 by 30, which is a certificate or a degree for adults age 25 to 64. They're called working age adults by the census. So that's the measure that we're using.
Got it. Okay. So in going down that pursuit, given the idea that there is a negative aspect to not finishing, what is MCAN doing to make sure that the students or the society or whatever are making sound choices in that regard, right? Because I believe it's a dual shared responsibility. If you send in a student to a school that is maybe outside their caliber, then you have a negative consequence on both. There's responsibility on both the institution as well as the student for, I don't want to say setting the sights too high, but there has to be some balance of that, correct?
Yeah, we use the term match and fit. What is the best match for a student and the best fit for a student? So that's academically, socially, financially. That could be the local community college. It could be Michigan State University. It could be Harvard. What is that student's best match and fit? And helping to advise them and be able to financially access that institution so that they're successful once they get there. What we have found, though, is that the system has been built in a way to specifically keep people out. If you, for those of us who have gone to college, you've often sat in an auditorium where the faculty member says, look to your left, look to your right. One of you is not going to be sitting here at the end of the semester. And it's sort of seen as like a pat on the back for the faculty member that I'm a really rigorous teacher, that not everyone's going to make it through. That attitude has to change because the folks that often drop out are students of color, low-income students, and first-generation college-going students. So what comes out of those systems are people who look like me, middle-class, male, white folks. We're going to be doing just fine. If we want to help those other populations, we've got to make sure we're changing the system so that rigor is important, but rigor doesn't mean we're kicking kids out.
Okay. And to the same argument, isn't there an aspect of that where you need to step up to the challenge at the same time, right? I mean, life's not easy, work's not easy. Everything doesn't get easier as you get on, right? Paying the bills, having a family, going through this sequence all over. There has to be some push to, I remember my hardest professor, and I did not score very well. As a matter of fact, it was my econ professor freshman year of college, and it was a writing intensive economics class. And it was painful every step along the way, but I had to spend hours in the library, and I was, I'm a well-educated individual, but I had to step up to get through that class. It was part of my requirement to graduate, number one, as a business economics major, and he was an absolute pain of a professor. I didn't enjoy my time. I didn't enjoy being in the library for 10 hours every weekend, but it's part of the gig if you want to get there, right?
Well, maybe. Having students feel like they're not enjoying education, having them feel the pain, I would say is not part of the gig. Rising to the challenge, having that grit, that persistence, absolutely. But if the system ends up booting all these students out, we don't have people to work in our economy. And in Michigan, we start importing talent from other states or other countries. As a country, we start importing talent from other countries. What do we do with the residents who have been born here and grown up here if they're not able to take the jobs that our economy demands? So if we want to be a fruitful economy, and I think we all do, and we want to have jobs and high pay, people be able to have wealth and assets and provide for their family, the system has to work for them. And that system starts in pre-K, continues on to K-12, into higher ed, and then ultimately into the workforce. Each of those systems has a responsibility to provide the necessary support for students. And I think that is what we have learned over the last few decades. College does not look like it did in 1970. It's more expensive. I would argue it's more difficult. Students need more support. Most of them are part-time students. They're working. They've got childcare issues, transportation issues. So all of these other wraparound services have to be either dealt with in the community, by support organizations, or by the institution itself if we want to get people into and through.
Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the things you focused on is something we tell every day, that, when you're looking to pursue the college journey, a 4-year degree, that you have to find, the way to win is to find that school that is the right social, academic, and financial fit. a lot of families, and I'll say especially students, probably the financial fit is the one that gets missed the most. It's not understood. It's, hey, I can take on that $10,000 of, loans each year. Like I'll figure it out, not realizing, well, you're going to have a $2,000 monthly payment after graduation. Like you're living with your parents. There is there's just not enough money to go around. I definitely think that is something that I see a lot with 17, 18-year-olds, that they don't have a grasp on that. Now, I don't know if that's part of the system that you guys work to try to educate. Something we're actually doing now is trying to get involved with, school districts to teach financial advocacy and how choosing the wrong school can really have a lifetime effect, from that financial piece. I think to look at it from I think the piece that always comes up to my mind, because this is a conversation that obviously is had about colleges and how hard it is. But I think, devil's advocate, you kind of say, all right, when you think about the system and you say like, hey, kids get kicked out. I don't necessarily agree that it's kicking out like, hey, we should find support, like to try and help 100%. But at the same time, I think sometimes the answers that I hear is that essentially the expectations get lowered to get the outcome, the desire that you want, where classes, let's make them easier so more people graduate on time. But that's not essentially actually making them more prepared for their potential work environment. Just because they have the degree does not necessarily mean they're going to be successful. So where does that balance come in? Is it more that, well, we don't have to lower the standards, but we have to increase the support? Right. So then I think that kind of the key that you guys are looking to focus on. That's what I think again, you hear the other side of the argument. We don't want to make a degree worthless. Hey, kids complain in class is too hard. Now everybody, teacher gets fired and everybody gets credit for the class. Like how, you know what I mean? I think that you hear a lot of things like that. So I'm curious what your take is, kind of looking at those two areas of, we don't want to devalue what that degree means, but do we also, that mean we have to create more support systems? Is that the solution?
Yeah, I think the support is the key piece here. We don't want to water down curriculum. We don't want to make things less rigorous, but we do want to increase those supports. And there's systemic changes that institutions can make that make the difference. We don't often hear a lot of folks dropping out of college because of academic readiness. It's certainly one of the barriers and certainly something that has to be tackled, but it's often something around that actually makes them stop out. They got a flat tire on their way to the community college and, they don't have the $250 to pay that, to pay that tire bill. They've got childcare issues. They've got to work. They just can't afford it. We hear a lot more about that. So as institutions think about retention and persistence, they've got to think about how they can build supports around that. And let me give you an example. What we have learned in this country is that remedial education doesn't work. So many hundreds of thousands of students across the country every year enter a remedial course like a Math 090 or English 085, something that is sub 100 level. It is not credit bearing, and it is meant because they don't have the skills yet to take college coursework around math and English to get them ready to take college coursework, college level rigor. The concept there makes sense, right? We're going to do this pre-work so they can be successful once they get into the regular work. The data shows that they never get out of those remedial courses. Something like 10% of students who step foot in a math remediation course ever graduate. We know there's a problem with that system. So what many institutions have done is gone to a co-requisite remediation. So maybe they add 30 minutes to the Math 100 course. They give that remedial education in that 30 minutes. And then also then the rest of the 60-minute course is the normal course. So they merge that remedial education in with the standard credit-bearing education. And they find that the gaps in student completion, especially for students of color, skyrocket. So they're providing the same content, just in a completely different way. Students feel different. Students are more successful. They haven't changed any rigor, but they've changed the systemic function of the institution to better serve students.
Okay. So I guess my question then is, that's to me sounds like a K-12 issue as opposed to a college issue. I mean,
Well, if you talk to people in education, they like to always blame the system before. So we have this sort of ongoing joke at MCAN that higher ed blames K-12, K-12 blames pre-K, pre-K says, why didn't the mother take more prenatal vitamins? And we go in this circle. So I think there's blame to share, but I think systemically we have to strengthen all of those things. We have to help, mothers before they give birth. We have to help provide, pre-K services and early on services, strong kindergarten services. You're absolutely right. K-12 has to do better, has to be better funded, better designed, better outcomes, and then higher ed has to also do better. We have to fix all of these systems, and that's why, as I described our work, we're sort of working on all of those systems. We've got high school work, we've got college work, we've got work even in the community, because ultimately this is all of our problem. We need a strong economy, and we know we need college graduates to get there. And we see all sorts of really cool things happen in communities when the attainment rate goes up. People vote more, people volunteer more, people smoke less, obesity goes down, wages for everybody in the community tends to go up. So even if you didn't go to college, if you live in a community where there's a lot of college graduates, you're receiving benefit from that. So it's really a transformative thing, not just for an individual, but for an entire community.
The one thing you were talking about certificates, I mean, look, we're in the world of helping families and students get into colleges, but I also very much had conversations quite often on, I don't think college is the right fit for your student. I think you should look at trades, it's a better fit. And that's where you're talking about certificates, correct? And I love the fact that that's part of your goal, right? We talk about that social, academic, financial fit. College is not a fit for every student out there. I know people that are extremely successful that went to trade schools. People ask me all the time, Joe, what do you think is the best school in the country? Right? And I'm not big on rankings, but the one I almost always talk about is a trade school near us, Williamson School of the Trades. And it's run like a military academy, it's very restricted, or it's not very restricted, but they very disciplined. They take a small number of kids. Half of the class is they look for lower income families with financial trouble, families with much higher financial need. And then the other half of the class is like any other college. You apply, you get accepted, you get rejected. They graduate, I think it was 75% of their class with 100% job placement. And the average starting salary is like six figures. Yeah. So to me, when you kind of say, well, what's the best college? You go, well, it's hard to argue with those numbers. And that's where I think every college should essentially aspire to, is like that type of outcome, right? It is fantastic what they're able to do. So I'm very happy to hear that what your guys' focus is not just on the college degree, but also the certificate, because there's certain paths that just, you can't force a fit. There's things that you're passionate about that might not require that degree, but other ways to go. So, and I think that obviously is more kind of leading up to that college years, because again, finding that passion, finding the pathway, what is the end in mind, and working your way back is extremely important. So is that part of what you guys are doing to kind of say, look, there are more than one pathways that you can take to be successful in life? It doesn't have to be what your friends are doing. It's specific to you. So what does MCAN kind of do with the systems to not necessarily push the idea that it's college or you'll be poor forever? You hear people, that's the only way. It is not true. And again, we're in the business of helping kids with college. And I can tell you, Dave will back me up. We know plenty of people that college wasn't the right path, but the sooner you learn that, the better the outcome is. Again, because if you start, you get a degree and use nothing for it, that's a lot of money that's wasted. So what's kind of the system there? Do you think some changes could be made? I don't know if you guys have ever addressed that, but what do you kind of see in the system? Because I think that is a big problem that we've got in this country right now, is that it's there and it's like, you have to do this. So what do you guys kind of look to systematically change to kind of take that away?
So our approach is for adults who work with students, whether that's in K-12, higher ed, or the community, wherever they happen to be, an after-school program even, that students need to be presented with the full menu of options. And that includes a certificate, associates, bachelor's, beyond. That includes the community college, the state institution, private institutions, out-of-state institutions. That a student is able to look at the menu and be able to access the full menu and decide what's best for me. What's that right match? What's that right fit? What's that right academic program? And be able to choose and not have barriers that don't allow them to choose. So then they get to choose their own destiny and pick where they want to go, regardless of what adult advice is. It really puts the onus on the student to control their own decision-making and control their own life, which we think is good for people in general, right? People should have choice about what they want to do and how they want to do it. Too often adults take that away from students. So we really want to push that full menu for students. In Michigan, we don't have a robust trade school system. Our trade schools are our community colleges. So when we talk about colleges, we're also talking about certificates at those community colleges. So what's really nice is that you're communicating to students that may not think they're college material, that they are college material. You want that welding certificate, you want that construction certificate, you're still going to the community college down the street as your colleagues who you graduated with. For your college material, you can access college. Your classroom looks a little different. Maybe the outcome, your certificate versus a degree, is a little different. But at the end of the day, you both went to college, you're both successful, and we lift both of those things up. So rather than trying to create a gulf, and I hear you're saying this too, in like certificates and degrees or trade school, skilled trades and college, we really try to even those out and say, both are great pathways. And in Michigan, you're probably going to go to a college for either of those. We want to make sure you can afford it. We want to make sure you're successful. We want to make sure the institution finishes you and that you're able to get out into the workforce.
So a lot of our focus in my entire career in the build of the College Planning Network and Elite Collegiate Planning has been educating people on the reality of the financial aid system and how it's actually designed and works. One of the focuses of my life has been financial literacy for everyone, right? Basically, like you need to understand interest, you need to understand debt, you need to understand budgets and standard finance. And I use kind of what I call the microeconomic household model for finance, right? Every household's a business. It's got money that comes in, it's got money that goes out, income versus expenses, right? And we've done real depth dives into finance and college finance and endowment funds and how funds are used and how the expected family contribution versus the cost of attendance and all that stuff works, right? And the reality is nobody understands it. And we spend our entire existence preaching it, and we preach it loud from everywhere on every platform. But there's this fallacy out there that, you know, the cost of college is, you know, $85,000, $90,000 a year, when the net price paid is more in line with $25,000 to $35,000 a year for a large portion. And now taking on $100,000 worth of debt is still a lot of debt, but it's a lot better than $300,000. And I think particularly in low income families, and I want to remind me to come back to families for a minute, because I think there's a valid point here that I'd love to discuss with you. The net cost paid at a lot of these schools, if you can get into them, obviously there's a barrier to entry and acceptance, right? But you can reduce down the cost of your education and go to a small regional private school or even a large private school where they have funds to support it. And a lot of them are focused on those lower income attraction because they're all kind of in the same gig, trying to level the community out, as I think you put it, right? We're trying to level this whole thing out. But people don't even look at those schools. They don't even consider those schools because they have no knowledge. Oh my God, it's the sticker price on it's $75,000. We could never afford it. And I can show you 1,000 case studies where that was the school that met the academic, it met the social, and boom, it met the financial, and it was never even on the radar for families. What are you guys doing in that area to educate?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. Michigan just passed a law that all students will take a financial readiness course in high school, which hopefully will help them understand all of those things that you just described. We think that's incredibly helpful. And we think that will help more students go to college because they'll be able to break apart the system that you just described that is incredibly complex. We work really closely with our state legislature to increase financial aid to students. We just had, I think, the largest financial aid increase in Michigan's history. Last year, the governor signed a new scholarship that will go to community college, tribal college, independent college, public university students, wherever you're going to go, which helps, again, even that playing field to say, if I really wanted to go to the private college down the road, but thought I couldn't afford it, now you can use that scholarship. You could also use it for the certificate at the community college. It really helps, again, open up that menu for students. And that came from our advocacy with our partners. So we're also
that is state-specific Michigan money, right?
It is, yeah.
If you didn't know, we're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn at Elite Collegiate Planning. Make sure to share and tag us.
Yes.
I just want to make sure.
We've been behind, we've been 48 out of 48 states in state-based financial aid for a long time. So I'm really proud. We're moving forward with that. We're not going to be in last place anymore. And we're really working with the institutions to do a better job at communicating that net price that you're talking about, really helping students and families understand what the actual cost is. And frankly, the media really, really messes this up. You turn on CNN, you turn 100%. On talking heads, and all they're saying is that college is $1 million and you're going to go into major debt and it's not worth it. There's no return on investment, when in fact all of the data says otherwise. So really breaking through that media haze, especially to your point about low income students, they don't even think they can access this at all. But if you can get them to fill out a FAFSA and they find out they're full Pell eligible, in Michigan, they can get a full associate's degree at any of our community or tribal colleges for free based on that Pell. You just got to get them over the hump to understand there's opportunity out there for you. But unfortunately, the messaging right now is that college isn't worth it and you're going to get into too much debt.
Well, and that's going on federal and state money. We haven't even broken the seal of endowment funds, where we have over 50 schools in the country that have over $1 billion in endowment, the highest at over $50 billion. That money is basically handed out every single year and regenerates itself just based on the principal and interest of gains inside of it. And so the idea that, I'll use my alma mater, Franklin and Marshall, right? It's a sticker price $80,000 school. If you show need, they're going to meet 100%. So if you're, let's say you've got a 50,000 income household, right? That's a lower income household right there. Two $25,000 earning parents, right? They're going to hand you $80,000 to go to that school, and no OZs. Very little OZs. I mean, you're talking of that, probably 27,000, which is the federal money, would be the OZs on it at most. And so, I mean, people got to open up. And one of our messages constantly is cast a wider net. Don't, and please, I love that you talked about the fuzz on the media, the noise, the just blatant disregard for reality sometimes. And I think left, right, center, I don't care. It's all just bupkis, right? The reality is you got to dig in and you got to understand this, because college is attainable. I've spent my entire career making it attainable for people. Yeah. And so I think it's a shame that it is. And I want to pick on Pennsylvania for a minute, because we're outside of Philadelphia, and there was a debate between at the time, the two candidates for Senate, and they were asked about the college debt problem, and their answers weren't even close to how they don't know how the system works. They don't know, like, all the stuff that we're changing right now at the federal level is not fixing it. We're not making the form easier. Great. You're just giving the colleges less information so that they're not as generous with their endowment funds and everything else. Like, we need more disclosure, not less disclosure. And so it was interesting. We did an episode on kind of a reflective back of that debate, and both of the candidates, not even close. And they're the ones going to Washington to try and fix it. And they're just not fixing it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, politicians are notoriously bad at this, especially since almost all of them go to college themselves, but they're usually of an age where college looked different, college costs different than when they went. their understanding of the system is decades behind. You really need folks that are more steeped in what's happening in 2023.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had a great story. I'll pat myself on the back on this one, but I had a case that came to me yesterday, and I've been working with this mom for a better part of a year. She's a single mom going through a rough time, and the only thing, again, I can do a lot for my families and planning. It basically was her life is a financial mess, but at the same time, I said, what we need to do is focus on private schools. We need to focus on not looking at the Penn State, the Temple, the Pitt, Shippensburg, Westchester. We just reviewed all of her acceptance and her award letters. And we're basically looking at Susquehanna, St. Joe's, Ithaca, Ursinus, and Dickinson, and then Westchester and Penn State. Penn State was the most expensive school she was asked to pay. Westchester was the next expensive. Every other private school was cheaper than the in-state state school, and all of them had a sticker price of twice the amount. And during that meeting, she said, all I can say is thank you for at least telling me that this, she's like, I don't know what I don't know, but if you didn't tell me to do this, I would have never done it. And then she said all of her friends, they're saying, well, why did you apply to all these private schools? And she said, I don't know. That's what the expert told me to do. And now she said, I'm going back to every one of them saying, yeah, obviously everybody doesn't know how this system really works. That's what they're hearing on TV. You're exactly right. That message is so incorrect. It's one of the biggest, and again, it's not for everybody, right?
Yeah.
But especially when you talk about low income families, not even money outside, not even talking about outside the government, but what these private schools can do is potentially make it cheaper than I've seen big time private schools be cheaper than community colleges in Pennsylvania for families that have low income. It is real, and it is a myth that needs to be dispelled as soon as possible, because I think you're right. A lot of people look, I can't afford it, and they don't even pursue. It's trouble that can be avoided. So we're right there with you on that message trying to be delivered. We're trying to help.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. We have a private college here in Michigan, just up the road from where I am, Olivet College. They just announced basically a free tuition program if you're low income. They're able to mix those financial aid on the back end, right? The Pell Grant, and in Michigan, that new Michigan Achievement Scholarship, their institutional aid from their endowments and other aid. They're really good at sort of like putting that in a pot, mixing it up, and coming out with a cake for a student. So We're really proud of those institutions who are able to be more creative and reach more students by doing that.
Yeah, and I think the ones, and I hate to say the schools have to play politics, but they have to play politics a little bit, right? And are you familiar with the pick and mix in the grocery store?
Yeah.
No,
right? You go in the grocery store and you've got the peanuts and the M&Ms and the Swedish fish, and you take a bag and it all costs the same. You just fill the bag with whatever you want. Well, colleges have a pick and mix of funds. Right. They're pick and mix. Yeah. And so we've got an endowment over here. We've got a need-based bucket over here. We've got a particular scholarship that was given by a benefactor of, that is of Hispanic heritage. We've got and they're able to then just like, well, we can take 10,000 out of this column. We can take 7,000 out of this column. We can pull 4,000 from the Pell Grant and present a package to people. And I think, the stigma of it's so expensive is for those that don't listen to, what's in between there. I want to change gears for a minute because I wanted to go back to one thing I said, remind me about the family. Family is so important in the lessons, right? And so I'm a father of 4. I've got kids 11 and under. And when my kid's struggling in school, I sit at the kitchen table and I work through it with them. And I put in the time and the effort and the energy to bring them where they need to be. And my concern is, and I don't have a lot of time. I run several businesses. I'm always on the fly. I'm always make time for my kids to make sure that they're thriving in whatever their pursuit is. How much of this responsibility that we want to blame the school system, we want to blame the college, comes back to the family itself or the guidance of the family?
I think that's a really difficult question because that assumes that a family exists, right? Lots of our students are in single parent households. In Michigan, we've got, 12,000 kids in foster care. Not everyone has that strong dad who's going to sit at the table with them like you do, which is incredibly important. It is transformative. We know the more loving, caring adults in a student's life, the better they will do in everything. Health, education, economically, work-wise, all of those things do better when there's more people who love and care about a student. So I do think it's incredibly important. What is hard is fixing that, right? And
everybody has the opportunity.
We can't, we're not a matchmaking services. We can't find moms and dads for everybody, whatever your family structure is. So I think you're right. There is definitely an effect of that, but how we as a society fix that is really struggle. How do we go back to the 2-parent household? We sort of have a dream that back in the day in the 50s, that was the great model. We know a lot of things were happening under the bubble there in those households that we probably don't want to go back to. But yeah, I think if we can raise the amount of people, whether that's after school people, teachers, school counselors, church
big brothers, big sisters,
the dentist. I mean, whomever it is in a community that can just wrap our arms around, I mean that metaphorically, our students and say, we care about you, we love you, your college material, we can help you get there. It's transformative. It makes healthier and happier communities.
Well, I think another point to kind of also reflect on that, it builds confidence. And man, confidence is the game. If you have the confidence to know, hey, you know what, I can do this. I talk about those kids that we talked earlier about the kids that may drop out or may, man, I gotta believe with the right mentor and a good push and some confidence behind the scenes that person does step up and it doesn't become that cataclysmic, downfall on it. And so I talk about the confidence game all the time. And, it's hard to teach confidence if you're fighting the outside dynamics that the peer pressures and the social media and the nasty political environment we're in and all that stuff. It's hard to teach that confidence to own your direction, know your direction, and pursue your happiness, whatever it is, and your success. At
MCAN, we call that social capital. Right. Okay. It's having folks you can rely on who will write a letter of recommendation, who, can float you a loan for $100 if you need it for your orientation fee. You have access to resources based on the people you know and are connected to. And again, someone like me, middle class, white, male, I had a lot of social capital. I sort of waltzed into college, didn't realize there were all these barriers, just had a lot of privilege come with me. If we can find ways to increase social capital for other populations, that will help them. And again, ultimately help society as a whole.
All right. Now on to the next subject matter. Politics are trash right now in the United States. We've got artificial.
That's a hot take.
Yeah, we're just going to leave that one as a side, but it is not. There is nothing productive happening in politics right now. Left, right, center, I don't care. It is not productive. We are non-productive. There's no discourse. There's no civility. There's no the logic and reason. Everybody's dug their lines in the sand and we're making no progress. We've got technological advances that we can't keep up with, which takes me back to one of the other conversations is we're packing more education into the same time period that we've always historically had, but we've got more knowledge now than we've ever had historically that needs to get jammed in. And you talk about systemic. I'm going, maybe kids need to go to school longer. Maybe there needs to be more education, period, because we're so far advanced from where we were even 20 years ago that to understand technology right now, I'm what I consider a intelligent person, and I run multiple businesses, and I am now in the algorithms trying to figure out how do you make your voice heard, right? We're doing the podcast. The origin of this podcast was simply to educate, to give the information out that nobody else is talking about, nobody else is giving. Glad to know you guys are giving it, right? But the idea is if you have the ability, you have the responsibility. right? So we have the ability to do this. We have the knowledge. We have the responsibility to share it. What is going to happen with the technological advancement, with the amount of information we have to now disclose and educate students on? Where do you see it going?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing now and what we're going to see in the future is a shift in education. The pandemic certainly, if you want to say helped that. We moved to more online teaching, more interactive teaching in that way. I'm sort of old school. I like the old school classroom, being around classmates. That's how I learn best. But I watch my children. They do everything in Google Classroom. I watch my son on the Oculus, and he's learning things through, the virtual reality systems. I think that is going to be the future of education. We will integrate those systems that are mostly used for business or gaming right now, that technology into education better. And I think it will move education faster and more effectively so we can get more content, because we're teaching using new pedagogy that is able to be more efficient, right? We're able to put on the Oculus goggles and be in the laboratory, whether you're actually in the laboratory or not. And we know experiential education, interactive education is the best education. Students learn quicker and better, and they retain that information. So I think this new technology will help us do that better. It's going to be expensive. It's going to be a little clunky because, how does Detroit Public, Community School District be able to afford things like that? We're going to have to figure that out as a society, and there will be politics in that. But I do think it will help us sort of jam pack more content into new methods that will help us get.
All right, now I got to play devil's advocate here, just real quick with that. And again, one man's opinion, but a lot of the guests that we've had and different people, one of the recurring themes that we always hear is about mentorship.
Yeah.
And I'm all for, hey, if technology can help kids retain information and learn things quicker, 100%. What I fear is that if we rely too much on technology, right, and it's like, hey, this is the way to do it. It's you are at home in front of your computer screen. There are certain aspects that, again, when we talk about going to college, it's not just, you talk about why college can be expensive. It is not just you can get the books, you can read them, you can educate yourself. There are things that come along with that, like having a professor that you may have a fantastic relationship that guides you and says, this is not the right major for you. You are so passionate about this. You need to pursue this. By the way, I've been in on an internship. I want you to go and do it. The social aspect of a school is so important. Right. And I think that if we start to rely more on technology, we potentially could lose that. And that is a fear that I have. And I'm not saying it still has to be that merger of the two. If one highly increases the learning environment, fantastic. But we can't get to that is how we now teach. Everybody learns differently. We all know that. Right. And that's why these new things like an Oculus, I don't even know what an Oculus really is, to be honest. I know the name and kind of what it does, but I've never touched it. We joke about technology. My 5-year-old knows how to use an iPad better than I can. But I don't want to lose sight that what you can get through education and in-person and relationships and community, and we talk about just networking, it has such a positive piece. And that was one of my big, I think it was one of our first podcasts we talked about when this pandemic happened, that they said they didn't want to use the term socially distant. They wanted to use the term physically distant. And that's where I want to make sure that technology doesn't overcome the lack of
doesn't overtake it.
Yeah, it's such an important role in people's lives. So I think that obviously becomes a hurdle. That's not just the solution. It can help. But what's it replacing, and now what are we losing? That's also important, I think, is a message that I would look at in that aspect.
I couldn't agree with you more. As I said, more loving, caring adults.
100%. Yeah.
It makes a difference. We know that. It is scientifically proven that we know that. So technology can't replicate that. Technology can't replicate that social capital that I talked about. You're right. Here's an internship. You should talk to my friend who works there. That's got to be human to human interaction. So there's got to be a good mix. adults who are in the mix, who are, helping students gain that social capital, and then the technology to help them gain the skills and knowledge that they need.
All right. I got one last thing before we shut down here. So I read an article, I don't know, probably 2 weeks ago about the chat GTP and the ability to write an essay and not actually have to have any knowledge on the subject and have it not be plagiarized. And we know it's artificial, right? How does a school system combat the ability of a savvy individual to cheat?
Yeah.
Given the amount of technology.
Yeah. I mean, my recommendation is to get rid of essays. Stop making that be your testing. Do more interactive, project-based work. We know that's what happens in the workplace, right? That the amount of times that I have to write an essay is very, very slim. I do a lot of grant writing, so it definitely happens. But almost everything I do is working with a team, brainstorming, project management. Those are the skills that students need to learn. So how do we do more testing, more assessment using those types of structures? So it doesn't allow for cheat. You can't cheat in a system like that. You can't cheat in a group. There's some built-in safeguards. So that is what I would encourage more K-12 to move to. Move to different types of assessments, different types of ways of measuring learning, so that you're not relying on folks, sort of rote memorization or the ability to write an essay. Chat, whatever, can't replicate being in a group project. And I know we sort of all hate group projects, but I don't know about you, but almost everything I do in my office every day is a group project. So you've got to really learn how to navigate that.
Yeah, and there's always the pro to every con, right? You have the person in the group that carries the weight, and you get into some of that. But that's an interesting perspective on it. And I was thinking, like, in the college campus environment, you almost have to go back to a computer lab for testing if you're going to do that. Like, you can't just have the open kind of forum and maintain the testing as we know it to this day. And I think back to all of the financial licenses. I had to go to a testing site where you're not allowed to take anything in. Yeah. And you go in and the computer's on a closed network, and you go in and you take the exam, which is interesting to think that the solution to even a multiple choice test, let's say that, or where you could have a computer read it and answer it and give you the answer, would now be to go back to 40 years ago when everything on a computer was done in a lab, and there were one room of computers. But it's interesting stuff. Hey, Brian, this has been a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I love the work you're doing. Keep it up. And we're fighting the fight on our side as well to try and educate as many families as we can on the subject. So it's good stuff.
Right. The more people that are talking about this and getting the word out about what college is really like and what college really means and how to actually access it will help more people actually get through that.
That's what we're doing. Yeah. Thanks for being part of it.
Thanks for having me.
All right. That's a wrap. Thanks for listening to College Knowledge, everybody.
We can send your student to the school of their dreams and send you to your dream retirement. Visit us at elitecollegiateplanning.com to get started. Thanks for listening to the College Knowledge Podcast with your hosts, Dave Kozak and Joe Kearns. We hope you enjoyed this week's exploration of higher education, sponsored by the College Planning Network and Paradigm Financial Group. That's all for this episode. See you next time.